All right, so welcome to Plodcast 109. Good to have you here with us. Thanks for coming, or thanks for letting me come with you, whatever it is you're doing. So I want to talk a little bit about Tom Ascol and the Founders Ministry. The Founders Ministry is a group of, it's a ministry within the Southern Baptist Convention that is calling Southern Baptists back to their Calvinistic roots. Anybody who's familiar with the Southern Baptist Convention at large today, it's a huge denomination, knows that overwhelmingly it's not Reformed, not Calvinistic. But the first 16 presidents of the Southern Baptist Convention were Calvinists. And the Southern Baptist Convention in its founding was very Reformed, very Calvinistic. There are Calvinists in the Southern Baptist Convention now, and Tom Ascol is the president of Founders Ministries, and they have been very concerned about some of the inroads that are being made in Southern Baptist circles. This is not a classic division of Calvinist versus Arminian. This is sort of Calvinist on the one hand, Calvinists who see and recognize the encroachments of critical race theory, and Arminians, sort of good old boy Arminians, who don't like the encroachments of critical race theory, but they're not exactly sure what's going on. So Tom Ascol and the Founders were involved in making a documentary. They're in the process of making this documentary to talk about what's going on, these challenges and these threats that are confronting the Southern Baptists. And they have everything to do with feminism, egalitarianism, women preaching in the pulpit, racial reconciliation, and what will be the basis of that racial reconciliation, and so on. The Founders released a trailer for the movie, for the documentary that's coming up, and as I said in a blog post, it was as though Tom Ascol licked his finger and tried to touch the Southern Baptist Convention's eyeball. It got a huge reaction, got just an explosive reaction, and there were a number of things that happened in the aftermath of it. Part of the reaction was there was a 2-second clip of Rachel Denhollander, who is, many would know her from her role in the trial of the medical doctor, a guy named Dr. Nasser, who was convicted of molesting a number of his patients and so forth. Rachel Denhollander was one of them. She was a former gymnast who was a patient of Nasser's, and she's since gone to law school, and then led the charge a year or so ago against C.J. Mahaney and Sovereign Grace Ministries because of her maintaining that they had not handled a sexual abuse case properly, and so on. So there was a 2-second clip of Rachel Denhollander in this trailer, which some people pounced on and said that Ascol and so forth were calling her demonic, which they were not doing. Their point was something else. Their point was well-intentioned Christians can buy into ungodly philosophy. Paul tells the Colossians to be on their guard. He tells them not to give way to vain philosophy. Well, that's what's happening in the Southern Baptist Convention, and so the Founders took they took those 2 seconds out of the trailer because it was a distraction. But in the meantime, it was pointed out that the new provost at Southern Seminary, where Al Mohler, who's a good guy, Al Mohler is the president at Southern, and a guy named Matt Hall had written, recorded some videos and written a number of pieces that showed that he was sort of into critical race theory up to his neck, and basically, if you're white, you're racist. If you're white, you've got a problem. And so those pieces were pulled down Just this morning, I read an article in the Federalist where Al Mohler was interviewed, and he said there that it initially looked like those articles were pulled down as a hand in the cookie jar sort of thing. But Al Mohler said in this interview, and it was very forthright, very straightforward approach, those were taken down because I requested that they be taken down, and I requested that they be taken down because they were not helpful. And the answer, the response to that is yes, they were not helpful. But I was really relieved that Mohler was dealing with it in a straight up fashion. In other words, now before I was concerned that they were just pulling the troublesome content down and not saying anything about it, and the whole thing was disingenuous. Now I don't think it's disingenuous. I just disagree with. I disagree with the people that Al Mohler is still trusting. I trust him. I'll put it this way. I trust Al Mohler, but I don't trust the people that Al Mohler is trusting. So what you need to do is the name of this film, when it comes out, is going to be By What Standard. The film is still coming out. It ought to get a if the trailer is anything to go by. The film ought to get a real marked reaction, and I would encourage you to be on the lookout for it. By What Standard, Tom Ascol. If you care about the Southern Baptist Convention, and you ought to, because it's the biggest evangelical denomination in North America, if you care about their future, then you need to care about what's being smuggled in under the guise of critical race theory, racial reconciliation, women exercising their gifts in the church, and so on. Always will be God. So we're continuing with Plodcast, episode 109. The Greek word apoplanao, is only found twice in the New Testament. The first use is in Mark 13:22, where it is rendered as seduce. The second is in 1 Timothy 6:10, where it is translated as err, E-R-R, not A-I-R, where it's translated as to err, as in to err is human. In Mark, the attempted seduction is offered by means of signs and wonders. Quote, "For false Christs and false prophets shall arise, and shall show signs and wonders to seduce, if it were possible, even the elect." That's Mark 13:22. What men find compelling is often the result of what they want to find compelling, and this means that if a man cannot read his own heart, then he will not be able to read a miracle in the sky, not even if the miracle is 50 yards across in bright red. The antithesis governs epistemology. People see what they want to see. They conclude what they want to conclude. They believe what they want to believe. In 1 Timothy, the problem is caused by the love of money. For the love of money is the root of all evil, which, while some have coveted after, they have erred from the faith, and pierced themselves through with many sorrows. 1 Timothy 6:10. Wandering off from the faith was caused by the love of money, a sin which many do not notice, since it is quite a respectable sin. So, we're continuing on with Plodcast 109, and the book review this time is a small booklet. It's out in different editions, but I'm commending one particular edition. The book is called The Loveliness of Christ. The Loveliness of Christ. And if you look it up on Amazon, there's a small paperback edition that was recently republished by the ministry that my father, Jim Wilson, is associated with. So if you want to identify which edition this is, it's the edition that has a preface by Jim and Bessie Wilson. So my mom, many years ago, Bessie Wilson, my mom found a copy of this book. And what the book is selections taken from the letters of Samuel Rutherford. Samuel Rutherford was a Scottish theologian. He was a commissioner to the Westminster Assembly. He was one of the Scots who was there at the Westminster Assembly. He wrote the important book Lex Rex, The Law and the Prince, or The Law is the Prince, depending on how you render it. He was on his deathbed. He was summoned to appear before the king because of that book, because of the treasonous thoughts in that book. And he was on his deathbed, so he couldn't make his appointment with the king. And he sent a message back, sorry, I can't make it, but I'm going to be where few kings and great ones come. So Rutherford was a political, theological theorist. He was highly educated. That was one his writing in one stream. And then he wrote these pastoral letters, and pastoral letters in the 17th century were often pastoral letters that had to do with the loss of loved ones, people dying and mortality, children dying, that sort of thing. And his letters are full of sweet consolation. Well, what happened is that someone went through all of his letters and pulled some of the choicest quotes and gathered them together in this small booklet. And Community Christian Ministries has published it again. There's a nice hardback version that's published if you wanted to give it as a gift, or like a wedding gift or an anniversary gift or a birthday gift. It comes in nicer editions. But this, if you just want to read it, and you really should want to read it, get the CCM edition. Jim and Bessie Wilson writing the preface. Rutherford says things like, your heart is not the compass Christ steereth by. Your heart is not the compass Christ steereth by. Rutherford is pointed, hard, comforting, encouraging. It is wonderful to know that our heart is not the compass that Christ is using. Golly, what would life be like if it were?
You've spent a pleasant half hour with Plodcast proprietor Douglas Wilson. This podcast is produced by Canon Press. Please take a moment to subscribe to the Plodcast on your favorite listening platform. To hear more from Doug, please visit canonpress.com.